This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi everyone, Alexa Linton here, and welcome to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm here today with someone that we've been circling each other for a while here in this industry and in the horse world. Literally we're talking about it about probably 9 years, but never actually met. So today is our first time getting to chat and really look at what he's up to in the horse world and the very cool things that he's doing in terms of what he calls a relational style of horsemanship. Really pleased to welcome you here to the podcast today, Josh Nichol. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's like you say, it's exciting for me to be here too, and it's been a while coming.
Yeah, absolutely. We've literally been trying to plan a date for this for a few months at least.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're very excited to actually find a time in our busy schedules to, come together here and have a really, interesting conversation about something that I truly believe is near and dear to both of our hearts, which is connection with horses and helping horses to exist in a more and more connected world that they can feel truly safe and safe to express themselves in. So let's get started. And I'm really excited to chat with you about how you do horsemanship, how you see horsemanship. I'm sure that's like such a huge question, but can you tell me a little bit more about how this way of working with horses developed for you?
Yeah. For sure. I find that for myself, we didn't really, when I got started, we had our own horses. We lived in Northern Ontario, and we actually moved to Alberta in 92 and kind of got going in our own way, in our own deal. And we didn't really have a lot of influences. So for myself personally, I find that just my own nature, I'm maybe more of a relational person. I don't necessarily, like conflict or seek it. And so then as we started getting into the horse industry and riding and, getting to know people, and as time goes by, you just kind of start to see things. And because I wasn't indoctrinated into a certain way when I was young, we kind of came at it with a bit of a different scope. So I really did want to seek, trying to find a way to connect with these animals that wasn't entirely dominance based. And so there's just different styles that seem to resonate with me, and other styles that I just struggled with because I didn't see the horse finding peace in that style. So to me, and I've always thought that the horse needs to be the judge of whether something's working or not a person. And a lot of times we'll look at someone who is influential, and because they're speaking, we're supposed to believe and listen, but the horse is calling for something different. And so I really tried to fashion my own style with my own horses, and I'm continuously doing this around that they are going to tell me the most about what works for them, from the basic levels of work to advancing them to the best of my ability. So constantly trying to grow in that and let them be a huge part of that process, and just learning, because they're the ones that really have the final say in whether or not they're pleased or that they're finding joy in it, and that they like the relationship. So it's a generic kind of quick bit, but
I love it though. What a beautiful way to think about it. And I've heard it through, it's interesting now, having had the chance to have conversations with different people who are working with horses in different ways. But the soul, the connecting piece is that sense of, I want to create relaxation in my horse. I want to create a sense of, are they enjoying themselves? Is this something that's actually relaxing them and de-stressing them, or is it escalating?
Right.
It's causing a sense of, learned helplessness or a sense of powerlessness in the relationship.
Totally.
So I love that we're kind of coming to the same place.
Yeah.
Obviously with different, some different strategies, but the same, heartfelt intention is true. So for you, what are some of the things that you because I know for those that are listening, we're all, I think, trying to build connection, and there's not a one of us that wants to create stress on our horses, but I think inadvertently we end up doing so, for various reasons. I know for myself, I was raised very traditionally, hunter jumper kind of situation, and ended up being, for all intents and purposes, very abusive to the horses I was working with, not intentionally, but right. It was again, like you say, with an authority figure, going, screaming at me, and I think this is the situation that a lot of people are finding themselves in, is going, okay, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah, that's right.
And it doesn't feel right.
Totally. I think the world is changing. I think that there are, being able to connect or think about how you feel, think about how an animal feels it's kind of growing. I think we're coming out of a time where people were just trying to survive, that life was tough and a lot more difficult than it is now. And just getting by was a big deal. And taking greater consideration to a more relational style, maybe wasn't as easy. I don't know if that's
not as much as a priority.
Yeah, totally. When you're just trying to feed your family and live, right? And so I think I think that, people are seeking relationship, and with the way of the internet now, you can seek it, and you don't have to just settle with what's in your local area. You can really look around and find people, and so I think for various reasons, there's a scope growing, and I think it's moving in a very positive way. For myself, I would say that, the way I look at it is, I think that the biggest struggle is not techniques and ideas, and we're going to get into this a little bit with the laying down, I'm sure, but it's not necessarily the things that we're using or doing. It comes down to the mind frame with which you view the horse.
Yeah.
And so I find that this is a really big piece, because even if you take the word leadership, there's so many different views on what that term means. I spend a lot of time when I'm teaching actually helping people understand what I mean by terms and with what intention I'm empowering it. Because that's really where the difference comes, is that you talk the word leadership with one person, and that's a total open door to do whatever you have to do to the horse to make them listen. And then you being the boss means you have leadership. Where someone else, it means something entirely different. So where I start usually is I start with kind of a general form of defining horsemanship styles. So the two that I usually speak of, and these are a bit extreme, but the first style is what I call emotional horsemanship. And it really bases itself on this premise that what the things that your horse does are interpreted emotionally. So if the horse pins its ears or swishes its tail or kicks out or does anything, this is interpreted with the same emotional status as it would be if it was a human, it's then taken personal.
Yes.
And then it's justified to use pressure. So then there's this real emotional intention to the pressure used, and it's very justified. And which then stimulates a very emotionally negative environment.
Yeah, an escalating environment.
Totally, because now the horse can't be calm because they can't think, because these pressures aren't clear to them, and without a clean intention there, it just stimulates a negative, which then stimulates the negative behavior, and so on and so forth.
And not only that, but their original feedback was not received in a place, in a space of what it really meant.
Totally.
Which was, I'm stressed.
Right.
I need, potentially, right?
Totally. Yeah. Well, and that leads me to this other style. So I then call it relational horsemanship. And relational horsemanship says that if a horse is struggling in any form of demonstration, they are expressing that there is an unmet need. And then it is then our job to meet a need for the horse, to see what they're showing us as a demonstration of an area we have to fill in, because they wouldn't have intended to go do the thing you're asking them to do on their own.
No.
So if you would like them to do that, then you have to meet their needs so they feel comfortable enough with you. So you kind of almost have to earn it instead of just feeling justified to take. And so then it comes down to understanding what a horse's needs are, and then being able to learn how to take care of that in yourself.
Yeah.
So that you're coming from a place of clean intention, and and that really comes into like the kind of the mentoring of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and then offering the horse a better deal.
Yeah. I mean, I said to Josh before, I went onto his bio and I was really blown away because very often in training, it's like, okay, I'm going to be training your horse, and it's like we leave out this like incredibly crucial part where it's like that the humanness that's involved in this relationship is actually oftentimes the thing that requires greater focus. And, I love that how you share around this is like that it is a challenge, and it does invoke growth within our own being, to truly be in relationship in this kind of way, and not just a reactive, like you say, feeling justified to, in a sense, perpetrate, harm on a our horses.
Yeah.
And that sense of, okay, and it's hard. I'm sure you find this, like, it's really hard to look in the mirror and go, okay, how am I contributing to what's happening within this relationship and the stress that's being created? So yeah, can you speak a little bit to that, of how you navigate some of those?
Yeah, well, in my teaching and in our platforms, I really spend a lot of time on that in the beginning, because I really want to save people time, as I don't want them to get drugged through a lot of what I do and then kind of be sideswiped by the fact that I do expect a lot from a person, and not to put the blame on the horses. So again, that emotional style really fits a lot of people, because then they don't have to take responsibility. You're allowed to just shuck it off to the horse, and then it's all about techniques and discipline. And this style is, very upfront about the fact that we're going to do our best to help you understand the school system that we follow to train a horse. But a major piece of that is working on how you interpret the world, because the way I think about horses and people is that really the horse is just this place where you're going to feel safe enough to just portray the way you look at the world, and how you look at relationships, and how you look at, yourself, and how you handle being wrong, and how you handle when it's not working out. And so there's so many platforms where a person is going to see themselves. And so in this school, the first thing is there's a level of community and support, in recognizing that we're all in this together, and that we're all working on ourselves, and nobody's exempt from it. So there's no more, you're not on your own. So then, kind of try to break those walls down of that loneliness. A lot of people feel like they're in their own corner, they're struggling. No one else is, because Facebook says everybody does.
Facebook says everybody's lives are perfect.
Has perfect families, and all their horses are soft and round, and only succeeding at obstacles. And it's like this, all this
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's a big piece to the puzzle. And then, so just trying to promote that mentality. So I really do feel like I try to give people the opportunity to make a choice about me quite early.
Yeah.
Because I really do want people to understand where I'm going. I've never, we don't advertise really. Like, we don't do a lot of promotional elements, because I found that word of mouth has really built my business. And I actually like that better, because I just want people to come that like the style and have heard good things about it, and want to promote this positive vibe with a horse. Right. So,
and then they're ready too, because it does take like to be at a certain place to really like own some of that stuff. And well,
for a lot of people, to own something means you might have to go back and build some bridges, or mend some bridges, or take responsibility. That's a huge thing, man.
It's huge. And I mean, like, I know for myself, the shame that I felt around the fact that I brought harm to like an animal that I loved so deeply, or said I did, which I did, but like just out of a space of, just not knowing, right? I can't imagine that I'm the only one that feels that way. I mean, many of us.
I see that a lot.
Right. And that's like that's a huge emotional experience to go through. Okay, I got to track back and like really own that how I was doing things was not only not working, but was, like into a space of even causing trauma or
Mm-hmm.
pain. So I think that, yeah, like I could see starting like front loading really,
Mm-hmm.
is one
Yeah.
of the words I learned at a workshop
Mm-hmm.
this weekend. So really setting someone up for success. It's like
Yeah.
something that we're up to.
Mm-hmm.
These are the resistances you might like face when you enter this
Totally.
world.
Yeah, totally.
And why it's
And
worth
then,
it, right?
yeah, totally. And handling it with grace, that just people are so used to just such a critical environment. And I find that in the horse world. I think that's in every world, actually. I should recant that. It's the people are so just trying to get by, and they're so used to such a critical environment. And there's a lot of that can be had. So I feel like that's a really major piece for people to really understand that we're always doing the best we can. Everybody is doing the best they can, and they're just taking information they've received, because we're in a spot when we don't know much. We kind of take anything from anyone.
Absolutely.
Our neighbor's uncle's brother usually knows more about horses than we do in the beginning, so we take whatever they've said and just go do it, right?
Yep.
And so I predominantly get people to recognize that it's very clear you've always done the best you could.
Yeah.
And now let's just keep trying to do better.
Yeah.
And when you give people the opportunity to actually listen to the horse, it's like, just instead of just letting your technique be the judge of what's good, or whoever said this technique is good, let's let the horses be a part of it. And that immediately changes the environment, because now you have this medium of quality in your work.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal for me.
Yeah, it brings in such an important, I don't even want to call it a layer. It's like a foundational piece of,
totally.
Let's, if we're going to talk about partnership and relationship,
exactly.
So many, strategies do, and then you see it fall short, right? It's like not, it's not real. It's not really a partnership thing. It's,
totally.
And so like, where does that foundation lie of like, okay, is that horse actually being allowed to contribute feedback and input?
Yeah.
And is that feedback and input being received in a healthy way that's going to enhance things? So I'd love to ask a question. Here's one of my pitfalls. I have a temper. And I'm sure you come across this. So I have like, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist and overachiever. And my mare and I have been together for a very long time. So 15 years. And I have a mare named Diva, and she is very much a diva. And we get into these battles sometimes, right? Because and oftentimes I've noticed it comes from this place of, you should know this, is where I go.
Yeah.
Like, you should know this. We've been 15 years. Come on now. She's just following an instinct, or, something else is going on, or she's like, responding to something in her horse way. And like you say, I'm putting my human lens on it and going,
Totally.
and oftentimes catching myself in this anger place. Is there a way that you tend to work with that?
Yeah, the reality is you're kind of touching on it there a little bit, but the reality is what I will usually start with is measuring a person's degree of awareness of the horse's position. So in most of these times, we're so quick to self-focus. So we focus on how we felt or where we're coming from. I spent a lot of time in my mentorship program talking about, I talk about 3 different levels. And so the first level is a very kind of self-focused, where we get caught up in how things make us feel, and we're maybe aggressive and negative and all of the things that wrap up us into our element of ego. And the third level is kind of a space where we're doing our best to kind of transcend those pieces of ourselves and work towards deepening relationships, building positive affirmations, and and so then and what I find for myself too, and I can speak for myself on this, is that I have moments when I just fall into that way of being, and we all have, or you're being very honest about it, but we have these areas where we're just have a hard time when that button is pushed.
Yeah.
And so for myself, proactively, I'm going to seek those spots out, and I'm going to, if it's a spot where I really know it's a trigger for me, and I really want to try to build an affirmation or some kind of mentality around what's actually going on. So if I can divide myself from it and I can say, okay, in this moment, my horse has obviously felt this type of consistency from me if they're consistently doing it.
Yeah.
And if that need's not being met, and if I can turn it around to saying, okay, what is it that the horse is seeing here that's causing them to overreact, and really pin it down. And so, and then the challenge is to be future focused instead of past focused. So the past focus says, whatever happened, I'm a little bit upset because of what's happened before. So it's like,
right. And so there's these like compiling triggers almost.
Totally. Instead of saying, what comfort level do I want you to feel like you can have for this tomorrow?
Yeah.
So then I have to divide myself from the past and then start really thinking about meeting that need and just separating it as how does my horse feel and what's going on for them.
Yeah.
And then what do I have to do to meet that need? And if I can transcend it sort of in my mind to that kind of third level way of being, what I want to be, how I want my horse to feel around me, it causes me a little bit more opportunity to divide myself from that moment. And for myself personally, I have to be practicing that stuff. It's like anytime I feel that trigger in me, I've got to find a way to think about how I want to be with that versus how I acted in the past, for
totally.
Whatever, right?
And it's a real gift to like be able to, like you say, distance yourself.
Yeah.
Because in the moment, and I'm sure many of us have felt this, where it's like that flush that comes up, and all of a sudden we're doing something
totally
that we know, not in that moment, maybe we don't know, but there's a part of us that knows that in even 5 minutes from now, we're going to look back and go like, oh gosh, I did it again. And so that, it can be quite a mindfulness practice, even in creating distance.
Yeah.
Enough of that to, do you have any guidance for us in that way of how you, build that skill in yourself or that resiliency in yourself?
One of the ways that I've learned to look at it is that I kind of divide responses from my sympathetic body's response. So I feel like a lot of those things are trained in the past because stuff has happened.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden we can't think. So and so I have process that I walk through of, obviously the first step is anytime I feel dopamine being released based off a negative, the first thing for me is taking a breath. I try to really recognize anytime, because that's how triggers are hit, is a thought happens and that thought stimulates an energy and that energy releases dopamine. And then the computer program of our body just brings back a feeling.
Totally.
And so it's actually just a computer, kind of a program bringing back something. So the more I recognize that in myself, that's just a program from my past. It's not actually how I felt. It's not how the moment made me feel. It's just my mind reliving the past and bringing back those things. The more I do that in a lot of the small things, the better my body gets at not reliving that the same way. Because again, I'm thinking of that future focus based on how I want life to be, the relationships I want with people and horses. So it chips away at the past having control over me.
Yeah.
And so again, and there's always times where you fail and then it's like 5 minutes later you recognize. But the reality is the more I can kind of live in that mentality of recognizing a lot of those emotions that come up are just because my body is almost addicted to a dopamine hit off of that way of being. And so then all the mare had to do was just trigger something, and that made the body think this is what we do when that happens. And all of a sudden I'm angry. And it's like, I don't even really know why, because it really wasn't that big a deal when I look back at it.
Exactly, right?
Right.
Some little thing.
Yeah, totally. So the more I can divide myself from my past tendency, and then I start focusing on, I kind of use that same process of what was the thought, pouring energy over it, and then waiting for more of my body to engage it through the dopamine. So you say, what kind of relationship do I want? And then I focus on that connection and I try to pour feel over it until I can actually feel that happening in my life. And then slowly my body starts seeking that instead of the past.
That's amazing.
Bit of a process, but
well, it's so incredible because I literally took a compassionate communication workshop on Thursday.
Okay.
Which is based on nonviolent communication.
Awesome.
And what's hilarious is you're basically like speaking the language of nonviolent communication. And I don't know if you've studied that or not, but it's so fascinating because it's all about naming feelings and needs and building a relationship built, based on empathy.
Cool.
And it's really about understanding and really getting into that space of how would, in this case of this workshop, how would this other person feel in this situation? Really like deeply inserting yourself into their shoes and like,
Totally.
with this and what might they need, like, and guessing that. But, what's really cool here is you've actually taken that whole concept and placed it in this space of these nonverbal beings that are always trying to share, information with us on so many levels.
Yeah.
So it's really beautiful that you're naming this and like a way through here. I think a lot of people find an impasse here where, okay, how do I get from here to here? How do I get from a space where I'm trying to dominate and assert myself over this being because I'm containing maybe fear or whatever it is, to a place of, okay, I'm in relation and I'm noticing and I'm, and I'm being really honest with myself around my own experience here.
Totally. Yeah, it's the beautiful thing of horses is that they become this amazing medium because they don't have anything else going on.
No.
And they had no preconceived notion. They weren't trying to make you look good or bad. So then whatever you're getting is just a beautiful mirror. Obviously they all have unique characters and different energies, but the reality is that they're just going to give back to you what they're feeling. And to me, that should be taken as a privilege, not as a criticism, right? The horse is not trying to make you look bad. They're just getting this from you. And when that can be taken in its highest form, so that's another kind of third level affirmation is to take what the horse is demonstrating and use it for your best. Feel what they're demonstrating to you, and with grace for yourself, just what is that? What are they demonstrating based on just a form or a way you've really justified that communication is good and that you should throw that out there. So whatever you threw out there, we're justifying it based on usually negative interpretations.
Yeah.
But you're seeing in the horse that that's being taken in a very negative way. So maybe we need to make a shift. Maybe you need to change the way you're looking at that and then see what the horse says then. And so we have this opportunity with this amazing creature to walk and develop better relational presentations in ourselves. And the great part is that anything a horse has taught me has quadruple amplified the quality of my life with my wife, with my kids.
Oh, and I was going to say, that was kind of like my next, okay, how does this impact your other relationships?
Yeah.
Right?
It just can't not, right? When you can recognize that how you present yourself affects people around you, and that the more you work at really thinking about that and carrying your own weight and not beating yourself up, recognizing with grace. And I love that word grace because it's like, you gotta have
it's a perfect word for it, because it is so common that when that amygdala comes up and the dopamine's released, and everything's freaking out,
totally.
We're triggered, that if we don't bring that grace and warmth, in an empathetic space to ourselves, much less our horses, then all of a sudden we're resorting to coping mechanisms that can be extremely destructive.
And that's the case. And that's where I see, because we give our brains, if we're not careful, we just give our brains something new to beat us up with.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people that care, this is, people that care, that just want to do better in life or advance and serve or, hold people up. Those people can be really beat up in life because they're quick to take things on their shoulders rather than just allow the moment to be what it is. And that's another third level affirmation, is just allow the moment to be. It doesn't necessarily mean anything deeply personal about your value or, it's just, let's just take that moment and learn from it and work to move forward based on this, And so many pieces where, and I've spent, I think this is going on 18 years that I've been teaching pretty much full time. I went to school for a while, but in the summer times I was teaching, and then just, it's all I've done really.
Yeah.
But you spend so much time, because I do care and I want people to do well, and I want horses to be in good relationships. So you just see so many people, and that would probably be one of the biggest pieces, is that when people realize this different way of looking, the first thing they want to do is just hammer themselves and just feel terrible. And then the body is now beating you with that, you know? And it's such a big deal to just always rely on that whole sense of, I've always done the best I could. I've always wanted to hold space for those creatures and people. But now I'm growing my intention to a new understanding, and now I can be better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's from that place. I mean, I truly, when I look at motivation in people and the efficacy of certain motivations, I mean, shame and guilt are only going to get you so far.
That's right.
They really, and yes, at times, very effective, but only to a point, and generally regressive. They're not something that's lasting. They don't, because they're not hitting a space of actually healing in ourselves and bringing comfort and joy and connection, which is what, in my mind, every human being, just like every horse, I think that's one reason we do get so drawn to horses, is that they know what it's like to live in connection and in community, and they are the ultimate teachers in like support and asking for support and receiving support, and so like this is, okay, what is our motivation beyond that place of just hammering ourselves with self-hatred and criticism.
Yeah. It's funny, it makes me think of this because I always think that, but have you ever seen that movie Monsters Inc?
Yeah.
So these it's like the perfect example, because so they go and they scare the kids, and they get that little bit of scare, they scare them like crazy, and they get this little bit of power out of it. And I feel like that's like shame and guilt and all these things. It kind of gives us a bit of a motivation, but it's very tiny. And then they learn that if they if they make the kids laugh and they bring joy, it's like, it just fills up their canisters like crazy. And I find that the same with so much.
That's amazing.
Anytime we turn our views to using negative motivations, it can kind of do something, but it really empties really quick and it's not very fulfilling. But when we can hit the pillars, and the pillars are being, these deeper truths that really set us free, the lasting effects just change everything about our lives. It's like, it can't help but make every element of your life better. Our marriages, our family life, our friends, our people we're working with, it transcends everybody. So I always think of that because it just seems to.
That is such a great example. And I'm totally using that. Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, like, I know for myself, coming to that space of like, I love that word grace, a sense of joy, a sense of connection, and even like a sense of like spontaneity and authenticity in my partnership. I would say I have like my mare is one of my best friends, and partially because we've been together for so freaking long, but also, this sense of, all that she's taught me, gratitude that I carry with me daily of, what she brings to the table, and how she's really been a catalyst to me showing up in the world, as my best self,
Totally.
When I look back at our starting point 15 years ago, and I'd come out of a traditional horsemanship setting, and I didn't know anything. And, she, from the very beginning, she set the ground rules strong. She was like, this will not do. Right.
So great.
And it was even things like, I'd bring in instructors, and eventually I just got the intuitive message, like, trust yourself.
And
I'm like, woo, because I've been so used to, having people tell me what to do, essentially. For such a long time.
Yeah, well, we're trained in that, right? So much of the way we learn in schools is that if the textbook says it's right. Absolutely. Follow the group, and if you're tested all based on the same thing, so we're kind of taught to just fall into that and not really listen to our intuition or the space or what the horse is actually saying, because if it doesn't, we're brought to a very surfacey space. So I'm that's another thing I feel like I'm seeing that in a lot of kids in the next generation, the younger kids, there's because of this movement that's starting to happen now, these younger kids are being cultivated inside of that space where they're being encouraged to trust their intuition and their giftings. They're not having to go through these thick, heavy layers of pain, which does bring a deeper empathy. One can hold more space because they've been through things, but it just brings another level of intent to connect to themselves, which is really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're seeing that impact in your kids, and
it's really fun.
Really rewarding.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that then the greatest challenge for myself and as we speak about intent and trying to get to a place where we're holding relational space for our horses, is that the great struggle is then also being able to bring a horse to our highest level of schooling.
And that's what I was going to ask about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of elements of schooling a horse to a higher scale which demand submission and dominance.
Absolutely.
And so it's been sometimes a bit of a lonely journey, and sometimes one where you feel like you're able to hold space with certain people.
Yeah.
And then there's others that are really, really there. So it's kind of been a hit or miss place, but trying to get to a place where you're not holding judgment. So a lot of times I find that even in my past, I would look at certain pieces of equipment or styles and I would, because I saw someone do it in a dominant way, then I kind of threw the whole concept out because I didn't want to have anything to do with that.
Right.
So I've gone to a place now where I'm trying to, I call it purifying equipment. And it's just take the equipment for what it is and then intend to use it with the most relational perspective to redefine its use as a singular space. And that how it's used is dependent upon the individual's intention, not necessarily the piece of equipment. And that's been a hard process because when you're hit young with stuff and then your body puts upon it, it's like that thing.
Oh yeah.
It's this evil energy because of what it did.
Totally.
And it really wasn't the thing, but
no.
So anyways, that's been a bit of a process.
Wow.
And then, just trying to get to a place where understanding what does it mean to school a horse to higher levels of balance. And that's really what's hit me in the last, I guess, 5 to 10 years is as horses can school to the higher levels by being inspired to higher levels of their own balance. So it's not done by force or by frame, but done by awareness and education. So that's been the real fun of it for me. And I'll be the first to tell you that there's lots of times I'm getting it wrong and there's times I'm getting it right, but it's all really about just learning. And I'm trying to bravely move forward and not be hindered by the areas that don't necessarily work, but just learn and keep moving. Because my thirst to get things is greater than my struggle with my mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are very lucky that our horses tend to be incredibly forgiving of our humanness, which is, thank God.
Totally.
Yeah.
They hold space for us so well.
They really do. And, I would love to ask, are you seeing horses kind of come to greater, through this process that you're sort of laying out, which is a much more organic kind of, I'm assuming slower at times process, because we have existed in a horse industry that's been about pumping them out, getting them 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-olds into the show ring. What are you seeing as far as what you're working with?
So I've kind of got, because my style is not very discipline focused, I've spent a lot of time, which actually has been a real asset to me, because I've got to come at it and learn what people are looking for from all these different perspectives, but yet still trying to just find the horse in it. And so, the classical system has become a real draw to me, because it's really much so based on the balance of the horse at its highest level. But then trying to marry that with the relational space. Yeah. So what I've found is that like I said, the last probably 5 to 10 years has really been a renewing of perspective based on my old nature wanting to just kind of make something happen in those moments, versus now seeing that those spots are areas where I have to redefine my understanding. And it does. Sometimes it takes a lot longer because you have to work. I find that a lot of times the reason it takes longer is because I got to work through Josh. And I was going
to say, that's where I get stuck. I was like, totally. Oh God.
Yeah, totally. Well, and the reality is that's the honesty, is that if we could present something in its clearest form with no mud and no emotion and no junk, the horses really have no obligation to what we're asking. Sometimes they don't have the muscle to retain it,
I was
but
going
they
to
don't
say,
have an
that would be your
obligation to.
limiting factor, is the conditioning piece.
Totally,
In that
totally.
case.
So pretty much anything that they're asked, they can kind of do it.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of understanding and then presenting. So I've really put, a pretty high call upon myself to try to be the best I can and retain a standard. So yeah, I'm working my best with my students and with myself to just continue that journey and understand the higher level movements. And some things with certain horses really kind of get me stuck because you're trying to work it out, and then others, it just seems to come so easy and natural, and the higher movements just seem to come out, and
Absolutely.
you just connect with certain horses. But what I find is the more I really work at being in the space, I spend a lot of time in my own personal space, trying just to deepen my own connection, so that when I'm in a space with a horse, I can really hear versus just impose myself. And I think that's one of the bigger pieces. We're always imposing ourselves upon stuff rather than just holding space and listening.
Yeah.
And I just find myself, I'm just trying to get better every day and just enjoy the journey.
Totally.
I think that's something I had to go through, which was, if I didn't get all my horses rode in a day, I was never happy. If I didn't keep moving, because I've got all these aspirations, and, I would be grumpy if I didn't get 4 horses rode in a day at least. And it's just to get to a place where, I'm just enjoying my journey, and I'm just trying to get better every day, and in whatever moment that is, whether that's talking with you or, training or whatever. Right. So it's pretty easy with the horses to get to a place where I was constantly kind of unsettled because I was never doing enough or never getting far enough.
Isn't it amazing when we impose those agendas, like those unwritten expectations, hey? And
totally.
They just haunt us.
Yeah. Well, now we're in a negative space, so then we're presenting negative communication because the horse isn't far enough and they're not doing enough.
And it's that enoughness oftentimes, which is based in a shame consciousness, right? So like that, it comes from this like place down within. It's like, do I truly believe that I'm enough,
Totally.
And I'm offering enough in this space and in my life. And, and how many of us can truly be like, yeah, I do. Like, it's very rare that, you could be asked that question and be fully in a yes in that question. I think it's so often a core wound, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not surprising that we end up in this place of, pressure.
Yeah.
Because we're putting that on ourselves.
Yeah, totally. And especially in the training, when you're a trainer.
Oh my God. And I like, it must be so hard. Like at times,
Well, and I find for myself, I've just gotten to a place where it's like, you know what? I am what I am.
I love that.
Totally. And if you like it, awesome. And if you don't, awesome. It's just okay, because I can only be what I am.
On that.
And there's days I really feel like I feel like I'm getting things and I'm moving forward. And then there's other days where it's like, oh goodness, but it's just a matter of living and learning, right? And trying to be in that. And I think that's the reason I have to spend so much time in my own space and, clearing my own mind and being mindful of my thoughts and these types of things, because if we're not, our past just runs us, right? And then there's no joy. And the reality is for a relational person, joy is a big deal.
Joy is a big deal.
If you're not finding joy in what you're doing, you fight depression and you fight all these pieces, right? And to me, that's, because I'm a feeling kind of person, I think that's why I can hold space and why I want relationship with horses. And so there's a lot of art to it and skills that I feel like I've had to kind of work through and learn and continue to learn in, which then you kind of just pay forward, right? You just keep working on advancing and assisting the space that you're in with people.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I see in you something that I've really had to like cultivate in myself is naming right away, like take me off the pedestal. I don't belong there.
Yeah, totally.
Like I am on even playing field with everybody here. I am a student of life, and I'm never going to be perfect. And if you put me on your pedestal, I guarantee you I will fall off.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's just too
much. It's not real.
No, it's not real.
Yeah.
It's
and
not.
When we want that, it's just usually a little bit of a level of insecurity in ourselves that we want to be elevated because we don't feel good with where we're at, right?
Totally. And we want to feel enough, and we want to feel these things.
Totally.
I think, something to share with all of you out there is, I know you won't believe me, but you are enough.
Yeah, there you go.
I know it's cheesy, but so yeah, and I wanted to chat with you today, Josh, and I don't know if this is the timing, or we want to jump into it on another call. We're like this has just flown by. What initially got me and Josh talking was I'd watched this particular video with lying horse down, and I was really in a curiosity space because I didn't have the vocabulary and to name what I was feeling in my body when I saw this particular thing going on. But I was watching the horse and watching the body language and things, and I know, for me, this sense of laying horse down was something that was utilized a lot, in days gone by. But it, very often in this video that I was watching, it seemed to me that it was, from this place of very lacking in choice for this horse, this sort of, when we talk about dominance. And I don't know if we want to unpack that now, or if we want to come back around to this later on.
Well, I think that we've done it the right way because we've kind of laid out if we were going to have this conversation about laying down, I would really want to bring a clear vision of my style and the way I look at things, because that really sets the tone. So it's totally up to you. I'm happy
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Go there.
So with the perspective of saying that we're trying to develop choice, then laying down is just another thing that we're trying to work towards. Now, the thing about laying down is that we are then asking our horses to become very vulnerable.
Yeah.
You're putting them into a scenario where you're taking their legs and you're asking them to lay down in your presence and really give up their self-preserving nature. So this is why I feel like people want to dominate that, because the horse doesn't want to do it willingly. So then the idea is, from a dominance perspective, that if a horse is too strong, then you want to kind of put them into that spot to kind of make that surrender.
Take them down a peg.
I think that's the idea of it being used in a very dominant way. Yeah. So that's where, ropes and gadgets and pressure and tarps and all of these things can just come flooding in because of the perspective that's being used.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, working with a horse to the point where, with some assistance, they end up releasing to the point where they will lay down in your presence, to me, has a very honoring element. Yeah. So I have a horse that, and this is, it's been a few that have done this in their lifetime, but this horse specifically is that, I'd take him places and he just lays down beside me. Yeah. It's not unassisted. I've never taught him to lay down. Actually, it's not something that, when I tried, it's hilarious. This guy's taught me so much, but I kind of tried and he was totally like, no. And it got so big that I was like, whoa, I don't even know how to handle this.
Wow.
But then when I released everything, years later, as the training progressed, he would just do it for me. So this was like this real thing of, does force really work? Is force the way to achieve these things? So I think that we kind of got to talk about a few things, but on the one hand, it's really helpful because from the cowboy perspective, there's a lot of talk about, you want a horse to understand how to yield to a rope. So if they get caught to a fence, or they have these scenarios that you have a value. And I've honestly seen horses, with ropes and then get themselves out of trouble because they knew how to give to a rope. But I think that can be taken, any of these statements can be taken to such extremes, and then, making them give up is a whole extreme version of that. So I guess my presentation on it is that I do teach my horses to lay down, but what I do is I teach them to follow a feel, and then there's a choice on their part to yield to these requests. So there's times I'll use a rope and I will wait until they know how to pick their leg up, and then I'll get them to lean back on a knee, but I force nothing. Yeah. I force nothing, to the point where those releases, they just follow the release, and then based on the direction that's given, then they lay down when they're ready. And so then it just turns into something that I teach, but it's totally not based on any kind of submissive need.
Yeah.
If a horse is not necessarily having their needs fulfilled, I don't look at it like it's something they need submission to.
Yeah.
They need somebody to step in and fulfill those needs so they can be calm enough so that they can give those things. I think it's a strong thing to take anything's body from it.
Yeah.
So the horse's body shouldn't be taken from it. The horse's mind should be earned, and then they should have some say in providing that.
Absolutely.
It's the greatest challenge with all the aids we use, right? We have bits and we have reins and bridles and saddles and all of these things where on some level, if the horse's mind goes to fear, I think we have to be ready to assist them so nobody gets hurt or whatever. But on the same hand, we have to be upholding a standard that says, let's just do our best to help a horse feel comfortable with us. And the things we ask are relational building, where the horse feels excellent about it, not forced or demanded.
And they feel safe. They feel safe that like being in our hands, right?
Totally.
Like, yeah. And I really see that as, I think Elsa Sinclair really brought this into perspective of her project working completely free, and it was like that sense of when we put a halter on, it's like we take a little bit of what, that freedom goes away, and like really, really like honoring that and respecting that.
Totally.
That stress can be created in that space, even inadvertently. And,
and I think it's a good point you make, because what I find is trying to kind of find this space, because I work with people on all these ranges. So from acreage owners to working cowboys to riders. And so the reality is it's kind of like, how do we honor that space and honor a horse in the halter, honor them in the saddle, and get them to where that we can go out and do a job, but yet still carry that space. And that to me is the greatest fun of it all.
The ultimate, right?
Well, exactly. Is to still yet, and I think that's really where my style of round penning comes in. I think round penning is a whole other conversation.
Oh God, we could we have to have a whole other thing on that.
But I think in general, we can say that with this mentality, we're trying to go into these spaces and develop connection. And so the way I go is, my round penning is really about meeting the main three needs of mind, space, and pressure. As a horse has to understand what to do with pressure. Their mind has to be a primary, and they need to know what to do with pressure. So pressure, I don't know if I said that in a confusing way. Mind, space, and pressure. So you need to know what to do with pressure. Space is the interaction. Yeah. And then who's taking care of things mentally. And once we've defined that, then a horse can kind of hook onto you, which begins more of a liberty style. Yeah. And then the aids go on top of liberty. And then I add to it. So I try to say that a 90-10 rule, 90% of the time I'm trying to use the aids to add value to a commitment they've already made and help them understand how to use their bodies better or facilitate what I'm looking for. And 10% of the time is do your best to stay alive. Yeah, right. Because there's always those moments. I wish there wasn't, we could talk church.
But with horses? Oh my gosh, there's always those moments. And prey animals, right? It's like, it's built in. Yeah, wow. And it really speaks to like, I know with my relationship with Diva, when I was in that like expectation fueled, agenda based way with her, it's like at the end of the day, we got way less done.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? Like the irony of it all was when I stepped back from that and I just like let it go. Like, we're just getting the coolest stuff.
Totally.
Just offering up, even the other day doing a lesson, and it's like, working with the shoulder in, and she's like offering a canter so easily. And I'm like, that just happened. Yeah, it's totally. Just like, always learning and always opening and seeing where we can create this and release stress and release pressure. It was, that wonderful moment, and knowing that she is the kind of horse that now, because of the relationship building that we have done, we can go into pretty much any scenario, and she looks to me, awesome. For help and safety and guidance. Yeah. And I take that as like a huge honor to be able to do that for her in our human world. Right. And that's really a big part of my role, is to steward her in a world that's like not her own,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
and that she hasn't chosen, right?
And
And
that
I
she
think
hasn't
that's
chosen. No,
yeah,
no,
totally.
for sure.
Very
Okay.
cool.
Oh my God, we could go on and on.
I think we could.
Coming back to this. Okay, we're going to take a pause for today, everybody, even though I know I just want to keep chatting. But we will, we will come back to this, the ground pen stuff and everything. And I've just so appreciated our conversation today. It's the kind of depth that I absolutely adore. And I don't get to have these types of conversations very often. So thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. I really appreciate you asking me to be here with you tonight.
Yeah. And so I want to come around to like, do you have any resources that you love? Is there anything that you kind of, hold near to your heart as far as, the path that you're on?
Well, I've in my journey, I've kind of been all over the place. I've regarding resource, it's hilarious, but probably, as we've discussed, most of the work being internal.
Yeah.
I've really received a lot of value from Dr. Joe Dispenza. That's been
okay. Yeah.
Been very influential.
Awesome.
And then from the horse perspective, it's a funny thing is there's been lots of different people, and I find myself I wish I was more of a reader.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like I spend so much time with the horses that I'm not necessarily as much of a reader. It's probably something I'm not proud of saying because
I know.
right? Like, and so, I've read books, by Nuno and some of his old notes that he's written. And so some of the classical books I found pretty valuable.
Yeah.
But I read them bits and pieces when time comes. And so it's kind of a piecemeal deal.
Yeah.
And then, I feel like I find, this is the great part, and you said this just earlier, but the more I spend time working on my own personal scope, my horsemanship just grows as a secondary effect. It's like, it's just grows. My horses just like me better because I offer a better deal,
Completely. They're like, you are far more lovely to be around.
Totally. Yeah. You're not blaming me for everything that you do,
Absolutely. Yeah. So those daily practices, and I know for you and me, that's probably another like whole thing that we could talk about is daily practices. What are our, and I know for myself, it's not always like, oh, I sit in meditation for an hour and that's just not how I roll. But, it is those little moments of, choosing a different thought and self-care and really choosing things that bring joy. Even those pieces can be profound. So
that's really I think that's the difference. Is all those little moments, because I wish, honestly, we've got a few businesses going, my wife, my kids, there's so much going. I would love to say that, I get up every morning and I, have this beautiful process.
I would love to say that too.
It comes down to how you deal with each interaction. And I guarantee you that's a whole other hour of conversation for us for sure. But that makes the difference, is how you handle each thought and the skills you use to manage the moments that come up and energies that come to you and words that are said and words you use.
Totally.
I think that my favorite element that I've learned in horsemanship and in life is to pause. Is no matter what happens, no matter what, is pause. And if I can pause for at least 5 seconds before I speak, or before I respond, or before I do something with my horses, it's a big deal.
That's amazing. And just sometimes we don't give ourselves permission to pause.
Yeah. Totally.
It's so weird. Like we're like, no, I gotta get, the moment will pass. It's like,
don't look silly.
It's good. You're okay. Stop.
Totally.
Walk away.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Come back with some value.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And that every moment is a practice.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Literally every moment is a practice in, how we're showing up, and, if we can see it that way, is it like there's teachable moments everywhere.
Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Such a pleasure. If any of you out there want to learn more about Josh and what he's up to, I will post his website below the podcast link, but it is www.joshnichol.com. And Nichol is spelled Nichol. And is there anywhere else you like to connect with people, Josh?
Our website's kind of the major deal. I do my best to connect on Facebook, but that's a bit of work for me.
Yeah.
But our website is the thing. We're really trying to, of all the places, I've taught for years, and teaching is awesome, but we travel all over the place. And I can get one place a year, and then you go and you inspire people to this thought process, and they have success. And that's really what built the membership site, was just trying to create a space for people to be able to connect daily if they wanted, or weekly. We've kind of got different levels people can commit to based on where they're at in life. And honestly, it's just been awesome, because I have people that I connect with, they're on there. There's a forum, there's webinars, people can check it out. But that's just been huge. So I spend the majority of my time in the site trying to be with my students, deep in the community, and create a safe space for learning, and then create the resources they need. So a lot of my webinars are built by students' questions and, problems they have, and things they want to see. And then I build series on it. So it's very interactive.
Love that. So they can go to your website to learn more about that.
Totally.
Get in touch. Okay, great.
Awesome.
Wonderful. So much value. Thank you very much for being here. And we will connect again. We've got way more to do.
I can see it coming.
Might take us a few months to
that's right.
figure out a time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for being here. And thank you everybody out there for, again, taking the time. We know that, time is of the essence these days. And so the fact that you joined us here is really meaningful. So hope you loved it. I know I did. And we'll see you next time.